Welcome to episode 3 of Rail Talk. My name is Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And the people have spoken. I'm proud to be sharing this stage with His Highness, Lord Green.
That's right. So no more nicknames, Joe Bianca. This is Jonathan Green, Your Highness, speaking to you live from my basement. Anyway, so happy to be back on the podcast, and we have a great guest this time.
Yeah, John, we also have a great guest this time. Did you say that?
I thought I heard that somewhere.
We are so thrilled at this time on episode 3 of Rail Talk to bring in a very prestigious guest, a Renaissance woman, I would say, in racing. She's a great host and reporter on the Fox Sports and NYRA broadcast. She's the president of the Racing for Home 501c3 for off-track thoroughbreds. And she's the host of the In the Ring podcast with Acacia Clement. Acacia Clement, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited about your new show. And obviously, I've been talking a lot this week with opening week of Saratoga. So sorry if I sound a little bit raspy, but looking forward to a fun conversation.
Yeah, we're so stoked to have you. And this is a very easygoing thing, so you don't have to worry about being buttoned up for camera, even though I'm buttoned up very technically here. Let's talk a little bit about Saratoga. You guys do a great job on the broadcast, as always. It was a wild first weekend with a lot of big short price favorites going down, a lot of big prices coming in, a lot of weather coming in and out. Just give me an overview of what stood out to you the most from the first week at Saratoga.
Well, I think just that situation you can't bottle, the energy of Saratoga, just the vibes of it all, how excited people are to be back there. You know, for us, we love that so many people watch the show all year round, and you get that to a certain extent at Belmont Park, but it's nothing compared to what you experience at Saratoga, of people coming up to you and saying, we watch you guys all the time, or, you know, we love the show, or we learned a lot, or whatever that might be, and just getting a chance to kind of be close to the fans and talk to them is amazing. And it's just, you know, so many people plan their family vacations around Saratoga. They plan their whole summer schedules around coming out to the track, which I think is really cool. And I think it's something that makes Saratoga so special. We had, you know, from torrential downpours to 800% humidity to the clouds coming in and it's like night all of a sudden, you know, kind of all of that wrapped into one, which is kind of typical of Saratoga too. But I think that for the most part, the sentiment is that we wouldn't rather be doing it anywhere else, and you take it as it comes. And, you know, it's easy to get beat up as a handicapper or doing picks up here. I had, I think, a decent first week, which is pretty much all you can ask for up here. A couple of good opinions really save you. So hopefully we can continue that way and not take it too hard with all those big prize horses winning.
And Acacia, Saratoga means different things to different people. You know, I'd mentioned that when I go there, it feels like you're stepping back in time. Is there a specific event or race or day at Saratoga that you really look forward to? And if so, why?
I always love Travers Day. I know it's kind of, you know, the big highlight of the summer, the Midsummer Derby. There are so many good grade ones that day. It has a lot of really good memories for me. On a personal note, you know, seeing Gufo winning the Sword Dancer the last 2 years was just, you know, so amazing, so special. I just cannot put into words what it feels like, you know, being associated with my husband, an assistant trainer, winning a grade 1 at Saratoga. It's just like the most unbelievable feeling that there is, and especially on that day. So I always look forward to that. I think especially this year, hopefully if everybody lines up in the Travers starting gate as it looks like it could be, it's going to be an unbelievable race, I think, with a really, really interesting group of 3-year-olds. But I think that's always kind of like the big day that I look forward to. And then the other day is, historically, it was the day before the Travers. Now it's the day after, but the New York Showcase Day that we do, and it's kind of like a Breeders' Cup for all the New York breds. And, you know, my father-in-law's stable has a lot of New York breds. I've now been based. This is my 5th Saratoga, so I have followed a lot of these horses for such a long time, and they kind of feel like old friends. And I love the New York breeding program. I love that we get a chance to celebrate, you know, the local breeders and maybe some of the smaller horsemen that kind of like this is their big day for the New York breds. And I think that's really cool that we do that too.
That's such a New Yorker answer, and I was going to ask you. Like, you've been here for a while now. You've been based here for a while. I remember you starting out at Gulfstream Park on TV. Do you feel like a New Yorker yet?
Well, actually, I've always felt like a New Yorker. It's funny. A lot of people think that I'm from Florida because I started out at Gulfstream. That's where people got to know me. But way before I started in horse racing, even though my family was born and raised in Connecticut, I was dancing in New York City 6 times a week from the time I was 10, really. And then I went to college in New York. I went to Fordham. I lived in the Bronx, and then I lived in Hell's Kitchen. Like I said, before I even got into horse racing. So I was really coming back to New York. I wasn't starting in New York. It actually was amazing because it felt like coming home for me. I still have a lot of friends in the city. I'd actually rather be there than anywhere else. And, my family in Connecticut we were always in New York. So it really is like home for me. So I don't think, of course there's following a different circuit and getting into, being part of the New York based team. But I think as far as New York in general, it's always been home for me.
Yeah, John, we got to get our research team screwed that up. And by the research team, I mean me, thinking you were from Florida originally. But no, that's awesome. And you lived in the Bronx too, so that's New York, New York.
Yeah, for sure. Covered that. Lived in the Bronx. Spent some time, I think, in most of the boroughs actually, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I got my first apartment. I lived, I think, for about 5 years before I started at Gulfstream in Hell's Kitchen. So that's my place. Yeah.
Yes. Very cool. And Joe, I don't know if you're noticing the pattern, but yet another Patriot League graduate has made herself into the top broadcasting of our sport. You have Steve Bick, you have Andy Serling, who was a Lehigh grad, now Acacia with Fordham. I'm a Lehigh grad. I'm saying we are like the birthplace of thoroughbred announcings.
I love that. I didn't realize it was such a theme, but I think it's cool. Yeah,
it is. It is. And they say you can't get a job in journalism and communications. I say nay. You can. You just have to go to the horse industry. That's the only problem. Acacia, tell us a little bit about the 501c3, about Racing for Home, because I know it's near and dear to your heart and to your mom and dad's hearts. I know that we've taken advantage of donating some horses to the program as well. But you started it when you were 17 years old, so you started it last year, I guess.
Yeah. 13 years ago, which is crazy. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And just tell everybody what it's about, because it's such a solid 501c3 nonprofit that should be promoted.
I appreciate that, John. And yeah, it is something that's very special to me. To me, it's kind of what I'm most proud of. I think people list all my accomplishments, which I have worked incredibly hard for and I'm super proud of. But I think the fact that I've been able to create this little sanctuary and what it's turned into, it's more than I ever imagined. And I couldn't be more proud of that. It's a lot of work. It's definitely a labor of love. But we started, like you said, when I was 17, my mom and I were discussing getting a horse. My mom is an incredibly talented horsewoman. I rode when I was younger and was at that point kind of getting back into it. And we were doing our research and we had decided we wanted to get an off-track thoroughbred. And we went to Suffolk Downs and ended up adopting this horse named Palace Diva. And we had kind of strict credentials of what we wanted. We really wanted a gelding. I really wanted a bay. So naturally, we left with a 3-year-old chestnut filly. So, and she is still with us. She's a member of the family. She has literally been on the family Christmas card. She's she was kind of the catalyst to start it. And I saw there, I believe at that time, a lot of the people that we were talking to at Suffolk Downs were saying, we're leaving for Tampa, we're going to Louisiana, whatever it is, and these horses are not coming with us. And I kind of realized, being on the backside at Suffolk at that time, which was still in operation, that there really was a need. There was an organization that was pretty prevalent in New England at the time called Canter New England, and they were doing a really good job with networking horses. But in 2009, 2010, aftercare really wasn't a buzzword. And on our side, not being involved in the racing industry yet, we had a really tough time finding a barn, a show barn that would accept a horse right off the track, even a filly, which was kind of crazy. And so Katie Collar, who is still our trainer from Cascade Equestrian, was literally the only one in Connecticut or in our area that would say yes to it. And she's been a huge part of growing Racing for Home too, and helping us retrain these horses. And we didn't really know what we were doing at the start. And now between Katie and my mom and me and all of our other great team we've created kind of a system for it too. And so we're rehab, rehabilitation, and rehoming. So we end up taking a lot of horses because we are very small. We only have 13 horses in the program. That's our max. And of course, we're always maxed out, but we end up taking a lot of horses that need long rehab times, have some significant injuries. We've adopted 2 horses from Puerto Rico that will never be riding prospects, but we try to kind of be that voice for the voiceless, so to speak. And like I said, it's financially tough, it's physically tough, it's emotionally tough sometimes, but you kind of look at it on a horse by horse basis, and you realize that you actually are making a really big difference for that particular horse.
It's so important. And you don't, honestly, I don't hear you speak about it that much. You're pretty low profile when it comes to it, but you're doing such great work and having such an impact. We'll splash up the website info on the screen, but just tell people how they can reach out and support.
We have a website. We have our social media. You can check out Racing for Home on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or follow my mom, Sherry Courtney. She tweets a lot of really uplifting pictures too, and a lot of updates about all of the horses in our program. We're also doing our first event this summer, which I'm really excited about. We're linking up with old friends Cabin Creek. They're just a wonderful, wonderful team that does sanctuary for retired racehorses here in New York. And they have typically done an event in the summer. And we decided to team up together and hopefully bring kind of both of our followers and both of our stories together in one place. And so we're really excited about that. It's Monday, July 31st at Nove. So you'll have great food, you know that. And Louis Lazanero has been wonderful and accommodating and helping us set this up. We'll have a fun program, and we'll get a chance to highlight 2 aftercare organizations and hopefully raise some money for our horses and help to give back. Yeah.
No doubt. Definitely a worthwhile cause. I wanted to ask you, I said you were a Renaissance woman off the top, but you also host a podcast. We're doing a lot of interspersing of podcasts, interweaving here in the early stages, but you do a great podcast that I think is different from a lot of other podcasts. And it's hard to separate yourself because there's more and more racing podcasts. You do one that's focused on the sales world called In the Ring. Can you tell me just about the genesis of that? And, just to put myself in this conversation a little bit, I'm learning a ton about the sales world just being part of West Point this year and going through that sales cycle for the first time. Have your eyes opened to anything? And just tell me about your knowledge growth over time in that area while doing the show.
Well, I wish I could take credit for it, but actually Pete Fornatal and Jonathan Kinchin approached me and they said, you were kind of one of the first people we thought who'd be able to eloquently speak about it, having had experience at the sales, which was super flattering. And so we started it a couple years ago, and John's been a guest a couple times, and Joe will have to get you on now and kind of get your experience of seeing the sales, because I think it can be really overwhelming. And I think it's a good example that a lot of people that are in the industry don't actually know a ton about the ins and outs of what actually happens in the world of the sales. It can almost be kind of 2 separate worlds. So I have really enjoyed it. I've met a lot of new people along the way. I talked to owners, breeders, trainers, bloodstock agents, consigners. We just, wrapped up the 2-year-old sale. So there was a lot going on as far as that was concerned. And I think it's really cool to highlight all that stuff because it all comes together, right? It all ties in from those sales. You see those horses on the racetrack. And for me, being at all the 2-year-old sales, I love kind of when I see a horse that sold at OBS March, I can go back to my sales book and look and see if I had any notes on that horse and kind of follow it or follow the trends of what was going on in the market. So I think it's been really fun. It's been really well received within the industry too, which I'm super grateful for. And we've got some more stuff coming up, of course, with the yearling sales starting soon this summer.
And Joe, one thing I've noticed just from walking around the sales is that Acacia and her husband are actually, pulling horses out and doing conformation analysis as well. How is that, Acacia? How is that translated into when you're in the paddock and you're watching horses come in, especially the 2-year-olds?
Yeah, I think it all ties together. And like you said, I mean, we do look at all of the horses, as far as buying for clients. So I'm also experiencing that side of things. I'm not just kind of, and there's nothing wrong for being there for fun, but I actually am part of the process and seeing firsthand about what goes into buying a horse at these sales for a particular client. This year, Miguel, my husband, and I did the January sale and then all the OBS 2-year-old sales. And usually my father-in-law, Christoph, takes over Keeneland in September and November. So we kind of, divide and conquer in that respect. But a few years back, I had the opportunity to work as a shortlister for Dennis O'Neill, who's a bloodstock agent and the brother of Doug O'Neill. And Dennis has bought 2 Derby winners. So he was a really great person to learn from. And he kind of taught me a system of taking notes and doing confirmation analysis and things to look for when it comes for soundness when you pull a horse out, because you have the pedigree, you have the breeze show, especially with 2-year-olds. And then when you see them on the shank, there are certain things that you're looking for, certain things that are just kind of non-negotiables. And then it's interesting because somebody like Dennis is often looking for a different type of horse than maybe Christoph Clement's looking for, or some of the clients from the stable are looking for. And it was funny when actually Dennis and then Miguel and I were on the same horse at a 2-year-old sale in March this year. I said, "What are you doing here? This is not your type. Get out of here." But I think it taught me a lot in learning to look for those certain things that you think of down the line. And then you will look when you see them in the paddock as 2-year-olds debuting at Saratoga, Belmont, Del Mar, wherever that might be. Did this horse grow into itself? Were you worried that this was a horse that was a little bit narrow behind? Did he fill out a little bit? This was a horse you worried maybe a little bit about some soundness. Did it take a long time for that horse to get to the racetrack? It all weaves together in those kinds of threads.
Yeah, no, it really builds over time, that like the knowledge you have and the context I think you have for these horses by seeing them at the sales. And you're pulling back the curtain, I think, in a part of the business where the curtain has been very thick for a long time and has not been as much transparency as there is now. And I think a large part of that is because of shows like yours. It's a good time, I think, to bring in the sponsor talk, because we're talking about the sales. We have Fasig-Tipton. We're very proud to have them as a flagship sponsor, and they got big sales coming up. They got the Saratoga sale and the New York bred yearling sale both coming up. The New York bred yearling sale has 364 yearlings cataloged. It's going to be Sunday and Monday, August 13th and 14th. And of course, we have the Saratoga sale, which is one of the marquee yearling sales in the world. 235 selected yearlings for that one. Going to be held August 7th and August 8th. Acacia, you've seen this sale, I think, from all different perspectives. What would you say kind of separates Fasig Saratoga from a lot of the other yearling sales?
Well, I think it's such a smart concept because it's right across the street from the racetrack. It's very easy to envision, hey, this is a yearling. Next year, we're going to be right over there in the Spinaway or the Hopeful or whatever it might be. It's right. Very easy to kind of sell that dream. And I think that's really, really smart. Also, because it's a select sale, you get the top-notch pedigrees. You get the top-notch physicals. There have been so many good horses to come out of that sale. I'm going to be working for Fasig again this year. Usually do some interviews. This year we're going to be doing pre and post with some consigners and buyers, and you get a lot of horsemen, a lot of trainers at this sale, probably more than you typically would at a sale, because they don't have to travel, they don't have to miss out on any of what's happening at their barn. And in the New York bred sale, I'm very excited. We will be selling for the first time. So Miguel and I own our first mare with a few friends. A mare named Irish Danzig, who Christoph trained, and she won at Saratoga. And she has a Cantharos colt who's going to be selling in the New York bred sale. So very excited for him, and we'll see what happens.
What hip, so people can circle it in the book? What hip is
I don't have it in front of me. I should have definitely done that, but I will follow up and I will tweet it out.
We'll get our research team on it.
Yes. Irish Danzig is the name of the mare.
Don't feel bad. I don't think they've published yet the New York bred catalog. So I think you're still.
So I think we're good
there.
Yeah, I think we're good.
I thought I had her. That's
no,
okay,
you're not gonna scoop her. But yeah, I mean, Fasig, aside from being one of our initial sponsors, they do such a great job. I really feel like that the Night of the Stars in November and that this week coming up, with the sale, two yearling sales, that it's really their time to shine. And you will never feel more like you're on a roller coaster, Acacia, than when you have your own homebred going into the sale. It is, especially because you don't have a lot of control over it at this point. You can do everything you can, doing the mating, having a drop, taking care of the mare in the fall, all those things. But once it gets into the consignment, it's just like we do when we shortlist, it's up to somebody else's, ideals as to what they think. And I'm telling you, you're going to take it a little personally. You're going to be like, what do you mean? What do you mean you don't like my Cantheros? Or what do you mean that it's got blah, blah, blah? It's got all these other wonderful things. So they're not your kids. You can't take it personally.
I was just going to say, it feels like I'm sending my child off. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, but it's a great venue. I mean, you couldn't pick a better spot than selling a New York bred up in the select New York bred sale. So we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And Fasig-Tipton November nominations are open now. I know of a horse, a fairly famous horse. A friend of mine is going to be selling at Fasig-Tipton November. Looking forward to Wonder Wheel selling at the Night of the Stars, as well as all the other beautiful and accomplished mares that night. I want to get into some news topics with you, Acacia, but there was one other thing I wanted to mention before we do that. You're on the cover of Saratoga Living this summer, and we'll splash up the cover right now. It's an awesome cover with the headline, Acacia Clement means business. Tell me how that came about and just what it means to you to be on that cover.
Oh, I'm definitely really honored. It's actually turned out to be so much bigger than I even anticipated. Brian, who wrote the article, reached out to me and asked about doing an interview for Saratoga Living. I said, okay, great. I'm driving back and forth from Belmont to Saratoga every week. So let's do a Sunday night after the races. I'm driving. And then I got a text about the shoot for the cover. And I said, wait, what? It's a cover, cover story. So they, the wonderful team, Abby and her team have been so awesome. They came over, we shot at Barn 80 on the Oklahoma, which is Christoph's barn. And if anybody's been there, I know I'm a little biased, but I think it's true. It's the most beautiful barn. And in between the two barns where Shug McGahee is now and Christoph is just this gorgeous spot. And we did a photo shoot there. And then the cover came out right before the meet started. And I guess they put one in all of the boxes. So I had so many people coming up to me and talking about it. But it's really special because I think, they did such a great job and Brian did such a great job in highlighting all of the things that I would have hoped to convey in the story, talking a lot about my job and about aftercare, about my family, Miguel's family, how important all of that is to me. And I think it's all of those things that make a person, right? It's not just one thing. Acacia, she's a reporter. There's so many more levels to what I am. And so I think it's really cool that we were able to have a story with all of that. And it's still fun and a little wild seeing my face everywhere on the racetrack in downtown.
Yeah.
There's a launch party too, right?
Yeah, we have a launch party coming up at Panza's next Tuesday. I think it's the 25th.
Very nice. Very, very nice.
Thanks.
And Acacia, with all this, with all this new money coming in now from you being a cover star, it sounds like you're going to need a new accountant. And I have one that I could definitely recommend to you that I'm not biased about at all. And that's the Green Group with over 800 clients in the horse business. So if you need to save money in taxes or you need to, to make sure that the royalties go to the right spot, you can't do better than Len Green and his group.
That was a lovely segue, John. I'm very impressed.
Beautiful.
Very impressed.
Man.
Usually Joe does it, but occasionally I see the softball and I want to hit one out of the park too. So no, but no, we're really excited to read the articles and to see you at the launch party and just the thing that I like the most about this story is that it's showing you in all aspects, in all facets of what you do, and I think that's so important because it's not just that you're doing handicapping or that you're in the paddock. There's so many other facets that should be emphasized, and that's what made me so happy when I saw that you were on the cover.
I appreciate that, and it feels really special for me too. And a few years ago, Patty Wolf was amazing and brought me in, and they did a story on me in the TDN, which got a lot of coverage as well. And it was kind of at that stage when I was moving away from being Acacia. She's Miss Connecticut, and again, that's a big part of who I am. But I feel like now it was just kind of mentioned, and not that it's not something I'm proud of, and not that it's not something I don't want to highlight, but it doesn't define who I am and everything else that I've done. So I think it's really kind of cool comparing from then to now and how far I've come and all of the other things I've been able to bring to the forefront and to accomplish and to be known for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you can speak to this, but as a woman in the industry, I think there is a tendency for people to label you as one thing and not, see all of the diversity and the Renaissance woman that everybody now knows that you are. So with that being the case, we're going to throw some news at you and see how you react. This was a little bit of a bummer. This story broke yesterday about Golden Gate Field. So Golden Gate Field is going to close down. Stronach Group is closing it down. It's yet to be determined what the process is going to look like. But I think, most of the Northern California people are probably going to have to, either leave the industry or relocate down to Southern California, because that's pretty much going to be the only footprint left in California. Acacia, this is something that we've seen, I think, more and more over time, with a lot of tracks closing and racing, contracting and consolidating a little bit. And I think there is some kind of an argument. I think Jon will make this argument for a little bit more contraction in racing, but you can speak, as someone who's on the backstretch, how is that going to affect the Northern California horse people? This kind of turns their world upside down, does it not?
It does. And it's hard because I can understand the thought process of it. I know in Southern California, there's been a struggle with field size and a struggle attracting the horsemen and maybe some competition from it. And I think it's a conversation that's been had in New York with the proximity of Belmont and Aqueduct. It's a conversation that's been had in Florida with Gulfstream Calder, now Gulfstream Park West, close by. And I think racing has to constantly develop. On the other side of the coin, I certainly do feel for the horsemen that have their homes there. There are so many people that make one horse possible, from the groom, from the hot walker, from the exercise rider, from the farrier, the feed guys, all the people that are local that are impacted by it. And I think that's one thing that we've really been talking about a lot recently with the longevity and the health of racetracks, is that it does so much for all of the people that work there and the community and what it contributes to the economy as a whole. And so I understand the need potentially for some consolidation in California, but I think it also has to be a conversation for people within the industry of looking at how much each racetrack and each individual horse really affects all the people that surround it.
And Joe, if I can just jump in here, I mean, I'm a big believer in supply and demand. And, 15, 20 years ago, there weren't enough racetracks. I mean, we were producing 40 to, 45,000 foals every year and full fields. And it was like, oh, are we going to get into this race? And they had a whole star system, that if you didn't get in, you got a star for the next race. I mean, that's how difficult it was to try to get in. Nowadays, with the full crop size the way it is, it's been diminishing and diminishing. I think we have to recognize as an industry that even though there's economic benefits to having racetracks all over the country, in reality, we only need 8 or 9 or 10 year-round racing circuits. And if we did that, if we had, one in New York, one in the Maryland, Pennsylvania area, one in Florida, now California, obviously one in Kentucky, Canada, I'm going to say one in Louisiana, even though it's kind of Louisiana and also Arkansas. Can I make that couple? That's close enough. And then you have like kind of these assorted random tracks that we need, at the lower part, where whether it's Charlestown or Delaware or Remington, Prairie Meadows, and then Joe, you always like the boutique meets like Kentucky Downs or Pimlico
so
or Colonial. where they do, yeah, right, where they do really, really well, but their meets are really short. So that you can say would be the ninth group. Now, I'm going to, Acacia, we didn't tell you there was going to be some math on this podcast, but there is going to be a little bit of math, and through the power of Patty Wolf and being able to put some statistics down there, just follow me for a second, okay? If we race on the above on that model with 9 different circuits year round, and you assume that they're going to race 250 racing days a year, so that's like 5 days of racing every week. 9 races a day with an average of 8 starters, which is just a little bit more than right now what the Jockey Club fact book is saying. Joe, you know the answer to this. 9 times 250 times 9 times 8 is, of course, 162,000. 162,000. You're exactly right.
That's what I said, right?
Yeah, that's what I heard you say.
Yeah,
exactly.
I heard it, yeah.
So if you take that number and you divide it by 6, which is the 6 starts per year that the average horse has. Okay, again, that's from the Jockey Club. That means that we need to have 27,000 horses racing to fulfill the 9 circuits. Okay. There are, again, according to the Jockey Club, 46,000 that are currently raced in 2022. So if we need 27,000, but there's 46,000, it means we have a lot more capacity to race. So yeah, that means that there's going to be some racetracks that are going to fall by the wayside and that aren't going to be able to stay around. But if you look at their purse size right now, there's a lot of racetracks that that can't be in business anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky because I think in general, it's very logical to make the argument for consolidation. Like you said, supply and demand. We have 7.66 horse fields. That's our national average, which is just not sustainable if you want to grow handle. But at the same time, when the closest racetrack is 8-9 hours away, then you're leaving out a big part of the population that'll have nowhere to gather and learn about the sport. Like, it's not like the Mid-Atlantic where there's like 12 tracks in like a 200-mile radius. And Golden Gate wasn't one of those tracks. And Acacia, you can jump in on this, but there are a lot of tracks I'm sure you've seen that are really just subsiding based on the slot revenue and the casino revenue. Golden Gate was not that. Golden Gate was a self-sustaining racing product, as far as I know, and that part is a shame to me because I think there's an argument to be made for consolidation that I agree with, but I think there were a lot more tracks higher on the list that needed to be pushed aside before Golden Gate. I mean, Acacia, you've covered racing at all sorts of different tracks. It would just talk a little bit about the difference between like the big time racing at Saratoga, where you can see the demand and the buzz. And I'll just use an example. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but a place like Charlestown, where it's subsistent on the slots for so long.
Yes, I agree with you about Golden Gate and how it is a shame. I've never actually gotten to go, so it's
that's why it closed, Acacia, because you weren't there.
I know. I was supposed to once when I worked for the Stronach Group, and unfortunately, just never materialized, which is sad. That being said, I think to use your example, Joe, of a track like Charlestown, for me, where the small tracks come into play, and I think that this goes with Jon's model as well, is that not every horse is going to be able to compete at a big track and a boutique meet like Saratoga. Some nights when we've been covering the Meadowlands, we'll take races from Charlestown as well. And those horsemen are making their living off those horses. Same thing, the riders, the jockeys, the grooms, hot walkers, all of those people are creating a life based off of that system and those horses. And those horses can still win races and still be competitive, but at a certain level, they're not going to be, competitive in the tough allowance fields that we have in New York, or let alone, the stakes races. Even the claiming races are tough and competitive in a circuit like New York. So I think that there is a place for smaller tracks such as that, because you have all different levels. It's like with any sort of athletics. You're going to have athletes that are the highest and athletes that are still competitive, but are just not up to that same kind of level. And so I think that, yes, there's an argument for consolidation. The full crop is a huge conversation because there just isn't the number of horses to fill races. I think there are sometimes complaints about filling races, But there's only so much a racing office can do if the horses just don't exist to do that. So I think that's kind of a bigger thing that we need to take a look at as an industry. And we saw Arlington close, which was unfortunate.
Right.
Now Golden Gate. So some tracks that really had some high level races and some wonderful memories from people. And so I think, we should kind of take it as a wake up call too. How can we as an industry make sure that we are putting our efforts into our racetracks that we want to save, that we want to make sure we have the healthiest ecosystem of racing throughout the country.
Joe,
honestly, sorry, John. I'll toss to you in a second. The part that frustrates me is it seems like we're supposed to be the racing centric companies that are shutting down these tracks. Like Churchill Downs built its fortune off of horse racing. Obviously, it's got its hands in a million other things now, and casino gaming and all that stuff. And the Stronach Group was supposed to be a racing centric business, and these are the companies that are shutting down these tracks that I think should be relatively low on the list of tracks to shut down. Sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I'm gonna put your feet to the fire now, Joe. Acacia, I'm not gonna do this to you because I like you, but Joe, all right, let's go. Name names. Which racetracks would you close?
I already picked Charlestown, so I'm sure I'll get a nasty call.
You can't
Kevin
close
Patterson,
Charlestown.
whoever that guy is that's winning at 40% at Charlestown. He'll call me up.
Okay. What about? I mean, I'll name a couple. Okay, and you can say yes or no. How's that? Can we play this game? Okay.
Sure.
You ready? Well, first of all, did you know there was a racetrack?
Won't come back to bite us at all, I'm sure.
No, never.
When we do a road show at Fodder Park, like they're going to be like, nope.
They're going to come with pitchforks. I know, exactly. That's all right. We're used to that. Did you even know there was a racetrack called Ajax Downs?
I've heard of it, yes.
Okay.
I have no idea where it is, but I've heard of it.
So we won't include that. Belterra Park.
Yeah, I don't think you need both Belterra and Thistledown.
Okay. Canterbury.
No, Canterbury's got a good product.
Okay.
No, Canterbury.
Right. That's fine.
I will pound the table for Canterbury Park.
I just bought a Minnesota bread for that exact reason. So it's all right. All right.
Bred by Acacia and Miguel?
It might have been. I don't know. Were you guys ever in Minnesota?
No, we only do New York breads.
Yeah, you're smart.
Right.
Emerald Downs.
No. Just because there's nothing else. There's nothing else in the area.
So no, you wouldn't kill it, is what you're saying, or you would kill it?
No, I'll keep it.
Keep it. All right. Finger Lakes.
Ugh, that's tricky. It's a New York track,
right?
What's really in the area, like Presque Isle? Yeah, by Finger Lakes.
All right, by Finger Lakes. Monmouth Park.
No, of course not.
Okay. I'll just ask you two more.
I want to hear the summer wind came blowing in across the sea for the rest of my life.
All right, two more. You ready? Retalma Park.
Yeah, I didn't even know Retalma was still racing.
Yeah, they have a condition book online. So, and Wyoming Downs, the famous. And Acacia, have you ever been to Wyoming Downs? No, that is the death knell then, because you weren't at Golden Gate and now you weren't at Wyoming Downs. So obviously they're going down also. But
we're going to have to cut all this because I feel like Acacia is going to be guilty by association.
No, I purposely said Joe and only Joe because I like Acacia. I would never put that. I would never put it.
You sit there like trying not to make any faces one way or the other.
Right, I know. He's got a good poker face. Poker face. But the nice thing about it is like nobody's going to take what we have to say to heart. It is an industry decision. There are decisions that have to be made. But people complain about the foal crop size and how it continues to diminish and that we're not bringing in enough breeders. There's just not an outlet for these horses. So you have to have some of the lower ranked racetracks as well, just to keep the whole racing ecosystem, in check.
100%. Yeah. I wanted to throw one more topic out there, which is also kind of a little bit of a bummer, but I think can turn into a nice retrospective and memorial. Acacia, were you old enough to remember Funny Cide?
I am, but I was not involved in the industry at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll just wax poetic very quickly, and then we can get off of this. But Funny Cide was the horse that got me into horse racing. He was the reason that I got into horse racing as a 16-year-old, watching the 2023 Derby. Him being a New York bred, I identified with. Him being a gelding, I guess I identified with.
You're
Just the underdog.
casual, but who knew?
just the underdog part of it, I feel like. No, but he, that's the thing. And he's, I remember the Saratoga bus they sent down to the Derby, and, I hit the try that day, which has been a blessing and a curse ever since. Cause I was like, easy game, man. And ever since that, it's been an uphill battle. But, I honestly think if you don't really remember him in this way, Acacia, I think you can speak to this, is like how much those stories enrapture people and get people into racing, that you don't have to be a blue bud. You don't have to be a bajillionaire to win a big race. You can get a bunch of, somewhat working class partners together. And that's one of the things we do at West Point, I think, really well is get people together who couldn't buy a horse on their own. Can you speak to a little bit about that, Acacia, and how big of a deal that is just for relatively regular people to be able to succeed in this sport?
I think it's really important. I think it's a big deal for people to see. I think this year with Arcangelo winning the Belmont, and obviously, Jenna Antonucci made history, not only with being a first female trainer to train a Triple Crown winner, but she has a small stable. Prior to the Belmont, her biggest win was a grade 3 at Parks and then the Peter Pan. So it's not, a stable that's always winning the grade 1s all the time. And I think that's a big deal. That's important for people to see and say, hey, it's possible. You can still keep dreaming about it. I wasn't involved in the industry in the year that Funny Cide did that Derby Preakness double, but I always watched the Triple Crown growing up. It was something my family and I would always do. We'd always make sure to turn on the TV for the Derby and make sure to watch it. And I just remember thinking, like, it was so cool because it's in New York bred, all of the other stories. And there was a Connecticut connection as well. And actually, it's funny, when I was Miss Connecticut, I did an event at this lovely banquet wedding facility called Mayhan's, and I walked into the bar, and there was the garland of roses from Funny Cide, and it turns out it was one of the original partners who has since passed away, and it was his place in Connecticut, and they gave him kind of all of the memorabilia, the saddle towel, the garland to display in the bar in Connecticut. And it was just really cool to see how much that had impacted people. And I felt with their yellow school bus, they kind of took everybody along the way with that yellow school bus, and Barkley Tag, the same kind of thing, a trainer that's easy to root for. And then years later with the same people bringing Tis the Law. And it's a shame that we didn't have the big crowds because it was during COVID. But I think on the other side of the coin, it was kind of the horse we needed that year, like the little New York bred that could to give Barkley his Triple Crown victory with getting the Belmont Stakes and, of course, the Travers. And it's just easy to follow along on that journey. And for me, those kinds of stories are one of the best things about racing.
Yeah, it's nice when you have these unknowns that come in and win and are appreciative of winning and grateful to the sport and just genuine people. And I think you can say that about the owners. I didn't realize till I looked it up that he was a $22,000 yearling purchase. $22,000. You know where he was purchased?
Fasig-Tipton.
Fasig-Tipton. That's right. Fasig-Tipton.
Nice.
Ding, ding, ding.
Which is really, really cool. I don't know if it was a tailor-made, consignment, but it was definitely Fasig-Tipton, which is good. The other thing that's interesting is, he raced 6 years at 13 different racetracks, and he ran in 14 grade 1s. So, I mean, he was like the little engine that could. He just kept running in these top races and wherever they wrote. I mean, he ran at Woodbine, he ran at Pimlico, he ran at Suffolk Downs, Fairgrounds, all over the East Coast. And also, I think, if I remember correctly, he did race at Santa Anita in one of the Breeders' Cups. But Finger Lakes, I had to crack up about this because they still publicize the fact that the Funny Cide was the only Kentucky Derby winner to ever compete there after he won the Kentucky Derby. And it's still like a big sign. It's almost like George Washington slept here. It's like Funny Cide ran here after he won the Derby. He's the only Derby winner to ever visit Finger Lakes after post Derby.
That's pretty cool.
Aww. All right, Finger Lakes can stay.
Finger Lakes can stay, yeah, because they have a cute story.
But yeah, then it's just the other thing I remember about Funny Cide is obviously the thrill of him winning the Derby and the Preakness. But that was the first horse that I was ever heartbroken for when he lost the Belmont. Like that that really hit me hard. And that the same thing happened the next year when Smarty Jones lost to Belmont. Like that to me, when something grabs you like that and can make you feel that emotional roller coaster, and people feel this way with sports at large for the, the most part, that to me, once you have that in you, it never goes away. And it was a formative memory for me. I regret that I wasn't able to go see him before he died, but he was the most important horse in my life. And shout out to Barkley Tag and Jack Knowlton and all the people who took care of him, because he was special. He was a real special horse. Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade Farm. We talked a lot last week about what a great job TaylorMade does at the sales, but we have someone who's more qualified than both of us combined to talk about the sales and who's selling a horse. Acacia, what do you look for in a consignor? And you've been around the sales for a long time. What do you think are some of the things that TaylorMade has done that let them stick around for so long at a high level?
Well, I think the name is really trustworthy. I think it's a really big deal with consigners. I think everybody has the certain consigners that they like to buy from and that they'll kind of immediately go to. And even if you don't necessarily see something that sticks out to you in the sales book or looking through pedigrees or whatever it is, you can go up and say, hey, you have anything that's really, really nice? And you trust that individual's opinion. And that's what it is about consigners. They're prepping the horses to come through the sales, but you're also getting their expertise and you trust their opinion a lot of the time. And if especially if you're at a 2-year-old sale, maybe the horse didn't work great and the consignor can tell you, hey, something happened, or this is totally abnormal for this horse, or whatever it might be, or with yearlings, or something mentally going on with them. You trust the expertise of that horseman. And I think that's definitely something we've seen with TaylorMade. There's a lot of trust there, which is a big, big deal when it comes to the sales.
Okay, that's a really good point, because I know when we walk around to consignments at sales, there are certain consignments that I won't even walk into. If I knew that they were selling Secretariat, I still wouldn't go. I mean, you have a bad taste in your mouth for whatever reason. But we've been working with TaylorMade for over 30 years, and we actually are selling 3 yearlings at the select sale through TaylorMade. So come on down and bring the kids. We're in Barn 10.
Very exciting.
Thank you so much to Acacia Clement for coming on the show. You know where to find her, but just in case you don't, you can find her on the Fox Sports broadcast 5 days a week at Saratoga. You can find her on the In the Ring podcast with Acacia Clement. And you can find her, let's flash it up again, on the cover of this month's Saratoga Living magazine. Congratulations on that again, Acacia. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, guys. So much fun as always. Hope to see you very soon.
Yeah, see you at the spa. A little bit of a peculiar story crossed the wire this week or over the weekend. Rombauer, not sure if you remember him, but he was the 2021 Preakness winner by Twirling Candy, owned by John and Diane Fradkin. And he had retired to stud and apparently was really getting no sniffs from the major stud farms in Kentucky and New York. And he said maybe some other smaller states had reached out to him. And so John Fradkin is deciding to put Rombauer back in training. He's going to Safi Joseph. It should be noted that he offered to send the horse back to his original trainer, Michael McCarthy, and Michael McCarthy refused. He didn't want to take the horse back. He thinks maybe it's the quote was, Michael's he's a conservative guy. And he's a little worried about taking the horse back into the barn. John, I feel like you would know this better than me as a breeder, as someone who deals with stallions up close and very personal. How hard is it for a horse to go mentally and physically, I guess, from being in the stallion shed to back on the racetrack? Because we don't see this happen really ever.
It really doesn't. And I don't have an example to give you of a horse that, that retired, bred for a breeding season, and then went back to the races. I know that a lot of the farms, what they do is they'll keep their stallions training. So they'll put somebody on their back every day just because that's what the horses are used to and be able to keep their fitness up. But I don't remember ever a situation where a horse was out for this long period of time and now is being brought back. I think what it comes down to is it was just a bad decision from the get-go. And I know you can look at it and say, well, the Preakness winners become stallions. If just going back, early voting's a stallion, not including Swiss Skydiver, obviously it's a filly, War of Will, Justify, Cloud Computing, Exaggerator, American Pharaoh, California Chrome, Oxbow, Shackelford. It goes on and on and on. So, winning the Preakness usually makes you a stallion prospect, at least in the eyes of the commercial breeders. But and again, no offense to the horse, but if you look at the horse's, PPs, it wasn't really that impressive. He won first time out on the turf at Del Mar. He ran second in the American Pharaoh as a 2-year-old, and then finished off the board in the juvenile. He came back and won a listed stake at Golden Gate, RIP, Golden Gate. They brought him to Kentucky to run in the Bluegrass. He ran third, and then they didn't even run him in the Derby. It probably was because he didn't have enough points to get into the Derby that year. So he basically took on either horses that had just run in the Kentucky Derby, and that had finished 1-2 in the Derby, but they were coming off a 2-week turnaround time. And he also had extra time to train for it. So, yes, he won the Preakness, and then he ran kind of a bad third. He lost by 12.5 lengths in the Belmont, and that was it. So I totally understand, why he doesn't have a resume for commercial breeders. There's just not enough there. And he's not a son of Tappet. He's not a son of Uncle Mo or a stallion producer. And no offense to Twirling Candy, because I think Twirling Candy is a really solid sire, but nobody's running, out to get seasons of a son of Twirling Candy. So I just think they got some bad advice, or they made a bad decision. And now, unfortunately, as an owner, I think they're doubling down on their bad decision, and they're trying to bring a horse back after that kind of a layoff. It's gutsy, it's ballsy. Some people would say it's silly, but it's their horse and it's their decision. I find that, look, the horse made $1 million for you. He made $1 million in purses and gave you all kinds of dreams and satisfaction. Why try to squeeze the lemon again and try to get it? You're not going to do anything as a 5-year-old that's going to make people want to breed to you. Even if you win a grade 1, people are going to say, well, it was as a 5-year-old. It was in a watered down division. So it's to me, it's doubling down on another bad decision.
Yeah, no, to me, it seems high risk, low reward, because he's not going to be hotter than he was as a 3-year-old after winning the Preakness. Now, I know he got hurt as he was starting to come back for his 4-year-old campaign. That kind of threw things into disarray. But just go to a lesser state. Kentucky and Japan supposedly said no. There's plenty of quality breeding and stallion farms all across this country that you can get decent money for. Yeah, squeezing the lemon dry, John. I think that's the term that comes to mind when I think of this decision. And I pray that nothing tragic happens, because then Fratkins will look even worse, I think, than they do now in the racing media. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode 3 of Rail Talk. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Acacia Clement for coming on the show. Thanks to Jon Green. Thanks to our producer, Patty Wolf, our associate producers, Nathan Wilkinson, Aaliyah LaRocca, and Anthony LaRocca. And thank you to our sponsors, Fasig-Tipton, The Green Group, and TaylorMade. We'll see you back here next week on Rail Talk.